On the information side of things, we have navigation design. Any part of the interface that allows people to go places is navigation. It enables the user to see that structure, and it's the means by which they can move through it. Think of navigation design as the place where the sitemap meets the design. The navigational system, along with content and the context of that content, should help someone understand where they are, along with where they can go. Navigation design typically starts with a sitemap, which looks something like this. You start at some sort of index page, which in this case is a home page, and then you have choices. As you dig into each one of those choices, you may also have additional choices underneath that. A sitemap like this is where we begin figuring out how many areas of content there are, how many things we need to be able to move people to and through, and how they're going to get to all of it. How's it organized? How's it prioritized? How many levels down does it exist? That gives us a sense of how the navigation is going to have to be designed. Good navigation design passes what author Steve Krug calls the trunk test. Okay, the way he explains it is, let's say you're blindfolded, thrown in the trunk of a car, and driven around the city, for an hour, and then unceremoniously dumped out in some random part of the city. Now, in most cases, you'll have no idea where you are, but if there is some type of effective navigation design around you, some wayfinding, some signposts that enable you to answer 4 very important questions. Where are you? How did you arrive here? What can you do here? And where can you go from here? Now, if you answer all 4 of those questions correctly, it means that the navigation design has done several things right. First of all, it's provided a strong sense of place. You know where you are in the grand scheme of things. Okay, and not only do you know where you are, but you have a general sense of how big and how large and how deep your surroundings are. It also sets the correct expectations in that you have an immediate sense of what you can do and where you can go. And finally, it makes it possible for people to accurately predict the outcomes of your interactions. Okay, if I go this way, I'm headed towards this place. If I head this other way, I'm headed toward this place. That's what good navigation design does. And the trunk test is a really good way of ascertaining at any given point, okay, across your application, across your site, across your whatever. It's a really good way to stop and check if your navigation design is doing its job. Anytime you get an I don't know answer to any one of those questions, you know you've got a navigation problem. Good navigation design is all about finding what you want, okay? And you do that in a number of ways. You're either browsing using a navigation system, you're searching using keywords or phrases, you're using filters to narrow large lists or large sets of information, or you're using some sort of pagination control, which gives you location information, it gives you a sense of depth, it tells you how potentially large this place you're in might be, and it gives you the ability to move around within a large information set. The interface for Google Analytics is a really good example of this because it allows multiple ways for a user to get at the things that they want. Okay, on the left, you obviously you have a search for reports for certain statistics, et cetera, but you have a very clear navigation tree that happens on the left that shows you how things are related, how things are organized, and it sort of illustrates the core areas that you can go to. Once you select any one of those things, as in this case where we're looking at demographics, you then have ways to control and manipulate and filter the information on that screen. All of that increases your ability to easily find what you want. It increases your sense of how much is available to you. And it increases and enhances your ability to move around within that data. So this is navigation design on multiple levels, okay? We're not just dealing with a single navigation menu. We've got multiple facets of navigation, each of which is very specific and contextual to what's being shown. One of the jobs of navigation design, as we said, is to reveal depth. So how can we reveal the depth of content before people navigate anywhere, before they go anywhere? Well, there's a couple ways we can do that. First, we've all seen dynamic submenus on a main nav menu, okay, which is a mouse over. You roll over something and you get a drop-down menu, or you click something and you get a submenu that sort of appears or reveals itself. The second way is by search results, and that includes the volume of results, how you filter those results, and how you move through those results in terms of pagination. Both of those things provide feedback, which is incredibly, incredibly important. There's an obvious result that comes from action. Information is delivered when requested. You also get a very clear sense of place. You get a sense of how much there is. When you see those page numbers at the bottom of a Google search result, you have an immediate sense of how much potential stuff there is that you may or may not want to deal with. The other way that depth is revealed is by using indicators and context to provide a sense of place. Every single element of the page, no matter how seemingly insignificant, contribute to this. Here's a very simple example. The fact that a page title matches literally the navigation label. In the navigation menu, the label says how we do it. When we hit the page, guess what? The page title says how we do it. The page title doesn't say our process or our methodology or the way we go about creating design. No, it says how we do it. That sends a very clear, immediate, quick, almost subconscious signal to the user that, yes, this is the page I selected. I got what I asked for. What I intended to do is what I actually did. An important principle of navigation design is information sent. And while that sounds kind of funny, I'm going to explain what it is. People typically estimate, based on what they see, how much useful information they're likely to find on any given path. In other words, based on what I see right now, at this very moment, I'm making a judgment as to whether what comes after this is going to be useful or valuable or meaningful. I'm judging the book by its cover in a lot of ways. Now, after I go down the path, then I compare what actually happened with my prediction. Was I right? Was I wrong? As soon as I no longer expect to find useful information, I move to another path. I move to another source. I click on something else. I leave. I visit another website, that kind of thing. So maintaining what's called information sent is very important. That simply means that at every level, when someone drills down into a process, when someone drills down into part of the interface, they have to see evidence that the stuff they're looking for is there. Here's a very simple example. On the Home Depot website, you have a category that says essential products for winter. And when you click it, you get this large contextual navigation menu that shows you a bunch of categories. Underneath each main category, there are individual choices. Under winter essentials, I have snow blowers, snow shovels, salt spreaders, ice melt and traction control, whole house generators, portable generators. The point is this: the minute I see that list, I need to see at least one thing that sort of speaks to what I'm after. If I glance over this entire list and I don't see something that matches what I need or at least indicates to me that they have what I need, I'm not going to go past this point. I'm not going to click anything to try and find out. I'm probably going to bail. Now, I realize that may sound extreme, but that's exactly what most people do. And the reason they do it is because we all know that we have infinite choices at our fingertips. We know that there are 2,600 other websites that we can go to look for the same information. So there's no penalty for bailing out and starting over. The minute the information sent starts to get weak, the minute we feel like we're not going to find what we're looking for, the minute there's any doubt planted in our heads, we're taking another path. Another important thing to remember about navigation design is that the path is rarely direct. People meander to some degree, okay? We follow links based on contextual relevance, on our interest level, and sometimes just on whim. We think something sounds interesting or we think something seems important. When we don't know where we are and we don't know how we got there, we attempt to back out or navigate to known location. That's why people freak out if they don't see, the word home somewhere or they don't see a little home icon. It's why if you're a developer, your clients are going, well, how do I get back to the homepage? Where's the homepage? Why isn't there a home link? Even though there's a well-established convention that when you click on, the logo in the left-hand corner, you go back to the homepage. We sort of want that safety of, okay, I know where I am now. But what that also tells you is that something is wrong with your navigation model. And what may be happening is you may need more than one way to navigate. Although navigation bars are very common, they're not the only method, for finding your way. Search, filters, tags, contextual links, these things can all be used to find information. For instance, what you often see in the body of text is that there are links contained within, so that as someone's reading, If they hit upon some important keyword and they decide they want more information, they may click on it. In this case, we see, okay, healthcare. Yeah, that's an industry I'm interested in. Maybe I'll click on this. That's a clue that it goes somewhere. So while that may not always be the primary means of navigation, it's equally as important. It's extremely important to consider indirect paths to moving around the site. Icons and labels can play an extremely important role in aiding navigation design. And there are two types of icons in particular that you have to be aware of because each is interpreted in a very different way. Representational icons have clear meanings based on their similarity to familiar objects and or actions. Okay, when you look at this set of icons, you know at a glance what these are. You don't need a label underneath them. You don't need a word next to them. You've seen them 100,000 times and you know exactly what they do. Abstract icons, on the other hand, typically require context and experience in order to learn their meanings. When you look at the illustrations, do those really resemble anything you've ever seen in the real world? Or do you know what they are because you've had repeated exposure to them over time and you've come to know what they mean? Very different. So whenever you make a conscious choice to use a more abstract icon, there are some important questions you have to ask to sort of confirm whether you're making the right choice or not. Number one, how important is it that someone can recognize and act on that icon that they see? Is it going to clue them in as to what they're supposed to do? Are they going to get it immediately? Have they seen it before? Is there additional context on the screen that also tells them what to do or what this is? Is there a label underneath the icon? Is there a label next to the icon? Are there other things on the screen that make it obvious or sort of go some distance in explaining what that thing is? And most importantly, is there time for them to figure it out? Which there may not be. For example, a couple of years ago, I worked on an application that was meant for first responders at disaster sites. Situations where a building is on fire or there's a tornado or a hurricane or something is happening. And these people need to be using this application as they're doing their jobs. In that type of situation, there's no time to be figuring things out, okay? Everything's got to be very intuitive, very obvious, and very clear. So abstract icons wouldn't make any sense in that instance. But using recognized icons, things that people are intimately familiar with, things that are instantly recognized no matter what the visual style may be, go a long way in allowing people to act and act quickly. There are some very specific things we can do to make sure that we're designing navigation that works in the true sense of the word. Number one, we can make sure that we use meaningful labels for navigation, links, and buttons. Don't be cute. Don't use esoteric terms. Don't use slang. Don't use acronyms. Okay, use things that just about anybody can instantly recognize, instantly understand. Call it what it is. Next, you can reduce memory load by ensuring that the navigation and the links are visible, findable, and informative. And I want to talk a minute about memory load because this is really important. There's a pervading myth where people say, there should never be more than 7 items on a navigation menu because people can't remember more than that. There was a big article that came out years ago that lots of folks I know adhere to and believe to be gospel. The article was called The Magic Number 7 Plus or Minus 2. The idea behind this experiment that was based on was to measure short-term memory by the number of things a person can recall. The key word here is recall, because in that experiment, they showed people information and then took it away. And after a few minutes, they asked them to recall what they've seen. When was the last time you saw a website or an app or a system that showed you stuff, then took it away and made you remember what you just saw? Never. Never happened, doesn't happen. Okay, so that rule, that theory, that experiment, that article has absolutely zero to do with the real world of navigation design. Recall is irrelevant. You're striving for recognition. Navigation should never show something and then remove it. Designing an interactive product isn't a recall task. It's a recognition task. So as long as a human being can recognize that this is the navigation right here, these are the links, and the labels on those things are meaningful, a large navigation set doesn't really present any real problem, okay? You're more likely to be limited or constrained by the device's form factor, right? Its monitor size or its screen resolution than by the number of elements, in the navigation menu. The next thing we want to do is reduce cognitive friction by making sure that people don't have to study or decode the navigation system. What they see there should be obvious, understandable, and intuitive. You want them to be able to find things quickly, and you want them to be able to use what they find. You don't want them to spend time looking for things. Navigation shouldn't resemble a scavenger hunt, okay? Your navigation system isn't a treasure map, so it shouldn't be cryptic. That goes back to what I said about cute labels or slang labels or acronyms or, things that only people in the know would recognize. Call it what it is. You don't want to force people to search for or chase the information, features, or functionality or tools or whatever that they need. You want it to come to them. You want it to be readily available to them. You want them to be able to find it quickly and easily. Good information design brings information and interactivity to the person when they need it, how they need it. That also means that the content that they see is contextually meaningful, right? It's in context with what they're trying to do. It's in context with the things they're trying to learn. It's in context with what they've seen previously. It's in context with the end goal that they're trying to achieve. Finally, good navigation design should always be consistent. And that means using the same interactions, behaviors, and visual styles throughout the site, throughout the app, throughout the system. Elements of navigation of any kind should never appear and disappear. They should never rearrange their order, and they should never move to a different location. Those are three absolutes. If you are doing any of those things in whatever you're building, your navigation is flawed and people will have a problem using your product. I promise you that. Even changing the organization of the page underneath the navigation area disrupts the person's understanding of how things work, okay? There are certain conventions that happen there that set an expectation about what they're going to experience and how it's going to be presented, and that affects their ability to effectively move through it. I'll give you an example. If I choose the first item in this navigation menu, notice how it highlights number 1 in dark gray. Number 2, I get a drop-down menu with categories of things: undergraduate, postgraduate, professional development, international students. Titles are in gray, and I've got a list of additional categories under each main category. If I click on the second